So now I'm doing it back again and maybe. Yeah, maybe you have some questions, so please feel free to ask. Maybe a simple starting question: why did it take so long? 5 years, 7 years you worked on it. Yeah.
It took very long because I started it because I was a production assistant and I wanted to do something. And the most important scene for me was this scene because it introduced me to cinema and art in general when I was a teenage. So I started making appointments with Richard and Llik, and I didn't have the money, so it was a complete foolish thing to do. But I said, yeah, I have a producer and I have the money and I can come to New York. And yeah, let's do that. And they believed me. So, and somebody gave me money. It was a miracle. So I left to New York and I started making it. And then I was stuck. I had to do it. So I didn't have any money. So it took a few years and I was stuck with producers. And it was a complete nightmare to do it, except for those people who really helped me and who gave me all the material for free and everything. Musicians were working for me for free, so everyone was believing, that it would happen. I probably was the only one thinking I'm never going to get out of it. And then in France it's difficult because I couldn't get any financial support, because they were all American and the subject was much too transgressive at the time. So they were looking at me like, oh, you're too young and there's too much porn. So that wasn't easy. Anyone has a question?
What attracted you to the scene in New York?
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
What attracted you to the scene in New York? What made you want to do it? And how did you find out about it? And, what attracted you to, the dirt, filth, and all that stuff?
Nature. It was for music. I was listening to many New York bands, Sonic Youth at the start, and Royal Trucks.
And was there a similar thing going on in Paris?
Absolutely not that I was aware of. So I think I come from a background that my family didn't talk about art or anything. It never took me to a museum or to cinema except for kids' movies and stuff. So the first time that I saw these movies, it was a friend of mine who I was going to concerts with, and we listened to the same bands from New York. And he gave me a VHS, and I couldn't really, it was a copy of a copy of a copy. So I was not really aware of what I was seeing, I think, and I was 13 years old or something, and I saw that. And something attracted to me in the dirt and filth aspect.
It's kind of like when I saw my first horror movie on TV. I think it was Dario Argento or something. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
How is the scene of transgression cinema these days? Is it alive? There is a market?
Well, this one is not dead, but it doesn't exist. And in my opinion, it never quite existed. I mean, there were people that gathered because they had the same age and the same desire to do something. But I never considered that there was any transgressive scene. Or you take every single person that is 18 or 20, and they're probably potentially transgressing the scene themselves. That's what I was thinking when I was doing that. That it was a continuous and repetitive process, and I was attracted to that scene, but there must be thousands of scenes like that, of people that are about 20, that are trying to do things. But I never considered that it was an actual scene with rules and a single way to do things and to see things. And so I don't know, in my personal opinion, I never knew people like that struck me that much, but there are so many transgressive things or people that are trying to break the rules, and for me it's like a generation thing.
I saw on one of the magazines, when this magazine came up, a picture of Christine of this magazine, George Couchar's name was mentioned there, and I wonder if, because he was obviously featured this filmmaker, if they were involved, or, you know, how was you know, because he was doing a lot of like crazy stuff.
To my knowledge, I never inquired about that. I don't know. I'm sorry, I can't really. What magazine?
There was this picture of the magazine that I can't remember who wrote the magazine with the black and white with the red lips on it.
No, they never ever talked to me about Couchar, or no, never. It was never related to that.
Okay, because it was at the same sort of time and similar interests, not quite as it wasn't he was much more just a weirdo without any. As far as I know, apart from his brother, without a group of people around him, but they obviously, his name was on the magazine, and I just picked up and wondered, but it doesn't.
Yeah, but I don't know. Sorry, we just never.
I think it was also. It's not true what you were talking about the cinema of transgression there. When you really see the films, you see that there is a certain kind of film culture in it, and also George Couchar may be a very important influence for Llik and maybe also for others, because what you are showing in this film is as if they had no horizon about film culture. And this Llik and also Richard Kern are very ahead of the time and know also the history of film. And this is completely missing.
In the film it mentions that we're all art students and they knew that. I mean, that comes out.
Richard is a big fan of Rosmeyer and Dario Argento and stuff. They have a background, they have a solid background. It's just that we never talked about.
Also, one very important thing which you should not forget is that Llik and Richard also know the films of the Viennese actionists. This was the first transgressive people performer in the present. And in history, always avant-garde artists did transgressive, aggressive stuff, but there is a certain comment in the film, so it is a kind of cinema of transgression which was there. It's not all, and also the other people do other films, you know.
I know, you can't talk about everyone, but I mean, it was obvious to talk about people like John Waters when it comes to, or Jack Smith when it comes to Nick Zed, or Gigi Allen when it comes to Richard, but I didn't have enough material to dig into it. But they were influenced by the no-wave cinema as well. I mean, it always comes from something. It's just that then you have to choose. When I edited it, I didn't understand what you said.
We had the discussion that it's a big misunderstanding that they have something to do with no-wave. They have nothing to do with no-wave cinema.
I think they have everything to do with no-wave cinema as long as they come from the same city and they were all friends. But that's a part that I didn't want to forget in my documentary. I wanted to privilege the human connections rather than the intellectual connections. When Richard talked to me about that, he honestly said to me that he had no idea where it was going to. I mean, it was not an intellectual process. They wanted to do things. And I wanted to privilege in that documentary the human connections, the neighborhood, and how you can get to make a movement. Because you are friends with someone. And I think Cassandra Stark was not at all influenced by the people from Vienna. And I think there were so many people in cinema of transgression at one point that there was no real connection when it comes to giving an homage to cinema. That's what I think. I just wanted to focus on the human connection rather than the intellectual, artistic one. So maybe it's missing from the documentary, and I know it exists.
No, it was just maybe it was just a misunderstanding that you said there was no, that there doesn't even exist a cinema of expression.
No, what I wanted to say is that
Can someone else ask the question? If you have an eye for someone else,
I'm just gonna answer that.
I'm sorry, I congratulate that you concentrated on a special time in New York, and I think a documentary can't do this to roll on the whole history of film connections and everything. And I think it's also an advantage that you didn't go much more into the music scene or maybe to the art scene, Michael, for example, an art of transgression or something like this, that you concentrated on the films, and I think it is very good. Great.
Thank you.
Hello, first congratulations for the documentary, it's very great. And I was wondering, as no wave music, for instance, there is many women involved, like I think about Bush Tetras or Lydia Lunch and so on. What is the role of, there is many women artists involved in no wave, and do they have a really active play as they have in music? Because I think like women in punk, but mostly in no wave, that they are very active and very strong.
That's what interested me also in this scene, and the no wave in the cinema of transgression is that women were very important as well. I mean, the question, I never wondered about that as well, because, for example, Finger on the right side of my brain, which are probably for me the two hardest and tricky films by Richard Curran, are written by Lydia Lunch. So I think when I talked to them, they explained me that there was no question of feminism or wondering about the role of a woman. They were. It was not the point to emphasize on the presence of women, and that's what I liked. That I mean, the wave scene is full of like Lizzie Mercier Desclous, or you take Lydia Lunch. It's full of women, and the two women that one of them you're going to meet in a couple of weeks, I think, it's Tessa Hughes Freeland. Ella Troiano and Tessa Hughes Freeland are the ones who really started the cinema of transgression as a movement. So it was, to me, it was a kind of movement that was driven by women at first. And when I was showing the film in France, I often had the question, people said to me, it's strange that a woman is part of that or is talking about that, because mostly roughness, pornography, obscenity are not considered, they don't consider that women can have that in them. And that's something I wanted to show, and I don't know if I insist on it or not, but I wanted to treat women and men on the same level in that film. I'm not very clear, I'm sorry, because I'm talking English, but it's not a feminine scene, it's not a scene of men, and I think it's a scene where men and women are really equal. I don't know if I answered your question, but...
Hello? Hi. Hi. What was I going to say? Basically, what I'm interested in is to what extent do you feel like, or in your mind, to what extent is the genre, the consciousness political, or could be related back to
social circumstance, as opposed to just like a bunch of crazies, like living out their pathologies, or in other words, how does that interact?
I don't think it was a bunch of crazies, because they were from, they intellectualized all they've done, and Llik in particular, but I think it was all related to these years in New York. They described New York as a jungle where people had to fight to stay alive, or wish that nothing would happen to them when they walked back home, late in the night. So, and it was the Reagan years, and it was really rigid. So I think they responded to that and to the fact that at one point it was really difficult to live in New York because of the rents. It's something that came back very often. That's why
it was cheap then. In New York,
they were cheap then.
Very cheap, but it was a very, very dangerous place to live then.
That's the first thing, that's the jungle side. But when Llik does Police State, it's when New York becomes really rigid, and they try to get people away from their cheap apartments, and it's very...
That's now.
That was then too.
That's why I'm here. I had to leave, but then, my father used to go on business trips to New York, and he would take us when I was a kid. We weren't allowed to go to certain areas like with nobody, you had to have somebody with you. It was in the 80s, and I was like little, and I had siblings. It was like, very, very dangerous. But it was also very, very cheap.
Not in the 90s.
Yeah, it was.
And the police was, well...
It was. I'll talk to you about it later. But like in that time period, like it was dirt cheap. It was like, like I would imagine Berlin was like that or something, where people could live like cheaply. There were like plentiful drugs. You have to talk to my parents about it, but there were like all kinds of stuff.
I talked to Richard and Llik and everyone in it, and they were telling me about how they felt that New York was changing. They felt that it was the ending of the period, and it was more difficult for them to stay in New York in the late 80s and the early 90s. Probably you've met them in the last few weeks and probably talked to them about that.
Well, what you put in was really important. You had a bit about the mayor of that period was Ed Koch, and he was like a tyrant. It was like a police state, and that was sort of like the beginning of New York, where you could get shot by a police officer.
Also, that's why Police State was made,
Yeah, it was very, for that time period, it created a lot of, however, like in England where they had the pumps, it created a lot of, like artistic energy for filmmakers, bands, and things like that. But it was... Yeah.
Yeah, I think so, but I have to insist on the fact that I always think that there is something of their own interest. People in their 20s trying to make something to break out, and it's not just political. When you talk to them, they explain to you that it was a way to survive and do things and share drugs and listen to music.
I didn't necessarily mean in a bad way.
No, but there's this really, that's why I talk about it, there's this really political background, and there's also the need of these people getting to New York, thinking that everything's possible, and that they can make movies and do things. Sorry, I'm from Paris, France. But that's what I wanted to tell you, because I don't know how old you are, but when you talk to me about New York, I have to trust them.
No, I was just telling her that my parents saved every magazine and newspaper article.
Like my mother's basement's full of like magazines and the articles, like she kept everything, and I would like read what was going on then.
Yeah, but you and I haven't gone through that. I'll never pretend I have lived that.
Well, no, I went through my own, but my parents, you know, I'm black, I'm from America, I went through shit. My parents did. Probably not because I was lucky because I grew up middle class, but, you know, I'm from a different background from, like, you know, them.
Yeah.
But, you know, like, America's a big thing with lots of different things in there. And,
but it's difficult when you do that kind of thing. It's difficult to summarize.
Yeah, it took you 7 years, you said.
But it's like 1 hour of people talking about their own experience, and it's their own way to leave New York, to experience New York. And what I have to say is how they lived that, how they experienced it. And maybe their neighbors weren't experiencing the same thing. Or, you know what I mean? There aren't any black people in the cinema transgression.
Because America is a very separate country. It's everything's like divided by like race, this and that, and it's like very difficult for me to explain. But like there were, it's very, yeah, here happen.
Thank you. Actually, I would really thank you that you made the effort to catch this time period. And I'm very happy that a film like this exists. I have to thank you because actually I have seen some of these people. I'm not from New York. I'm not familiar to anything you are talking, and I just see your film as a part of history. And I'm interested that so many young people left who have not experienced this type of like art. And I think it's a type of art which is brings some scary things and which brings some disgusting things. And we have a youth generation also making art who is not familiar with this area. And I have seen Llik live, I have seen Fetus live, I have seen a couple of these guys on stage, and I think they are my age. I'm the same age, but still, also I'm not familiar, and I have seen in your film some kind of bringing this period of time nearer to me. And that's the one thing I want to thank you, because I feel it as you have given something to the youth. And although you are young yourself, I like that. And I also, yeah, that's what I wanted to say. So sorry. And I feel like you guys who are out of this time and out of this city, you should not take so much of your own, because it's your film. So I felt a little annoyed.
I'm just talking.
Yes, but I think we should better ask her about her ideas. Yeah, but why don't you do a film? And the next thing I want to thank you is that you gave us a good example of how you extended 7 years doing this. You know, I feel like very, very encouraged to go on with that theme and to not give up. And that was another very different thing. Thanks.
I think I'm also really thankful that you did this film. I think the audio now, if you like, I just like to say something. Thank you very much. But this film I made for the people who didn't know that scene as well, because I discovered it by chance, not knowing anything about that period, that city, because I was never there, and those people because I didn't know them. So I was just hoping that that film would help people who weren't familiar with that scene to begin to understand it and to become familiar with it and search in different directions who they might like, what art they might like, what they could find that was interesting in that. And I don't pretend to say the truth about anything, but I'm saying what I heard and how I felt it at the time. And I was just hoping that people who wouldn't be interested in that kind of art would take 69 minutes to wonder about what motivations they had and how they could manage to do art. And maybe I thought that if I could do that as well, people would, you know, get interested and start making things, and it maybe sounds arrogant, but if I could do it, I mean, there are a lot of people who can, yeah, open their minds and start digging into those stuff. Yeah, I think.
Thank you so much for everybody for coming, and thank you so much. I knew it was great.